My name is Hannah Lane, and for most of my life, I thought I knew who I was. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania where everyone knew everyone, and secrets had a hard time surviving the gossip that danced through the streets like autumn leaves. But somehow, my family managed to bury a truth so deeply that it took 25 years and a dusty letter in the attic to unearth it. I was raised by my mother, Teresa Lane, and the man I always believed was my father, Daniel Lane. He was a hard man, quiet, disciplined, a bit cold, but I chalked it up to the pressures of life. He worked at the steel plant for 30 years, never missed a shift, and rarely missed church. We had family dinners every Sunday, like clockwork, even if the air around the table often felt stiff and strained. I was an only child, which made the silences at home even louder. My mom would try her best to fill the void with stories about her youth, decorating the silence with laughter and old pictures. She was soft, warm, always smelling of lavender and cinnamon. I loved her more than words could say. She was my anchor. But even she never spoke of how she and Dad met, or what their early years were like. I didn't press. Not until later. Things began to change the year I turned 25. It started when I went over to my parents' house after work one evening. I had a key and usually just walked in, but that day I hesitated. I could hear them arguing. Their voices were muffled but heated, filled with a strange tension I hadn't heard before. I stood frozen in the hallway, not out of fear, but curiosity. Then I heard my name. "You know we can't keep this from Hannah forever," Mom said. "We've kept it this long," Dad replied harshly. "What's the point now?" My heart thudded in my chest. I opened the door louder than I needed to, pretending I had just arrived. They fell silent instantly. Mom offered me her usual warm smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Dad barely looked at me. That night, something shifted inside me. The unease I had felt growing up, the strange way my father looked at me sometimes, like I was a duty rather than a daughter, it all started bubbling back to the surface. I knew something was wrong, something bigger than a petty secret or misunderstanding. But I had no idea what storm was about to come. A few weeks later, my parents left town to visit my aunt in Florida. They were gone for 4 days, and I agreed to house sit. I walked through that house with a different set of eyes. Every creak in the floorboards felt like it was whispering something to me. I searched drawers, photo albums, even the old filing cabinet in the study. Nothing stood out, until I went into the attic. The attic was stuffy, filled with the scent of old books and forgotten time. I pulled the chain to the bare bulb and looked around. Boxes were stacked high, marked with labels like Christmas, photos, and memories. One box, unlabeled, sat in the corner, covered in a thin layer of dust. Something about it drew me in. Inside were letters, postcards, and envelopes tied together with string. I picked up one thick envelope, addressed in delicate handwriting to Teresa Grant, my mother's maiden name. My fingers trembled as I untied the string. The letter inside was dated May 1998, exactly 9 months before I was born. Teresa, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I had to leave. You deserve stability, and I can't offer that right now. My heart aches knowing I won't be there to see our child grow up, but I trust you'll make the best decision for them. Please know I loved you. I still do. Forever. Michael. Michael? The room seemed to spin around me. I read the letter over and over, trying to understand. My mother had never mentioned Michael. Never. I dug deeper through the box and found photos. Old, Faded pictures of a young man with dark hair and piercing eyes. There were more letters, all filled with a love I had never seen between my parents. I sat back, my hands numb. The truth was starting to form in my mind like storm clouds. Michael was my real father, not Daniel, not the man who had raised me, scolded me, kept me at arm's length my entire life. The man I called Dad had known. My mother had known. And for 25 years, they both lied to me. When my parents came back from Florida, I didn't confront them right away. I needed time. Time to cry. Time to feel the ground beneath me shift. Time to scream into my pillow and wonder why I had never noticed all the clues that now seemed so obvious. One night, I invited them over to my apartment. I made dinner, Mom's favorite pot roast, and lit candles to try and make it feel warm, safe. When we sat down to eat, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Who is Michael? I asked quietly, looking directly at my mother. Her fork clattered onto the plate. My father's face went pale. Silence hung in the room like a thick fog. Where did you hear that name? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I found the letters. In the attic. I know he's my real father. Isn't he? My mother's eyes filled with tears instantly. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. My father, no, Daniel, just sat there, expression stone cold. It was complicated. Hannah, Mom began. You were never supposed to get hurt. I did what I thought was best. Best? You thought lying to me my entire life was best? She sobbed then, covering her face. Daniel stood up, staring at me. You want the truth? Fine. You were a mistake. Teresa got pregnant with another man's child, and I married her anyway. I raised you like my own, even though I knew you weren't mine. Do you think that was easy? His words hit me like a slap. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I didn't ask for any of this. I whispered. You should have told me the truth. I had a right to know who I am. My mother was shaking now, trying to explain, but I couldn't listen. I stood up, the chair scraping the floor. I told them to leave. Neither protested. That night, I lay on the couch, holding the letter from Michael against my chest. I didn't know where he was, or if he was even alive, but I knew I had to find out. I needed answers. I needed the truth, all of it. The life I thought I had was gone. My foundation shattered. But I wasn't going to let their lies define me anymore. I was going to find Michael, no matter what it took. The morning after I kicked my parents out of my apartment, I woke up feeling hollow. My eyes were swollen from crying. My mouth was dry. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. For 25 years, I believed in a story that wasn't mine. I believed in a father who wasn't my father. And now that I knew the truth, I couldn't know it. I took time off work and spent days reading the letters over and over, trying to piece together Michael's identity. The envelopes had return addresses, but they were old and scattered. New York, Chicago, Seattle. The trail was cold, but it was all I had. I started with the earliest letters. He had beautiful handwriting and a gentle tone. He never once sounded angry. He always talked about how much he loved my mother and how sorry he was that he couldn't stay. One letter mentioned a gallery opening in Chicago, which gave me a clue. Could he have been an artist? I searched online for any combination of his name and art. After days of scrolling through dead ends, I finally found something, a gallery archive from 1998 featuring an artist named Michael Weller. One of the paintings had a signature that matched the one on the letters. My heart jumped. He was real. I contacted the gallery, and after a few days, a woman named Sophie called me back. She had been the gallery assistant back then. I asked her if she remembered Michael Weller. Of course, she said. He was quiet, passionate, disappeared shortly after his last show. Nobody knew where he went. I asked her if she had any idea where I could find him now. There was a pause on the line. Actually, she said, I got a Christmas card from him about 5 years ago. He said he was living upstate, somewhere in the Catskills. That was all I needed. I packed a small bag and left that evening. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. The drive to the Catskills was long and filled with silence. My thoughts were loud enough. I played out 1,000 versions of the moment I'd meet him. Would he slam the door in my face? Would he cry? Would he even remember my mother? I stopped in small towns, asking around. Most people didn't know the name, but one man at a coffee shop in Tannersville said something that made my chest tighten. Michael Weller? The painter? He lives up near the old orchard. Doesn't come into town much. I thanked him and followed his directions, winding through hills and trees until I reached a small, weathered cottage. The yard was overgrown, but charming. Paintings lined the porch, leaning against the wall like forgotten memories. I walked up and knocked on the door. My heart beat like a drum. Seconds felt like minutes. Then the door creaked open. A man stood there, tall, lean, with silver in his dark hair and tired eyes that widened the moment he saw me. Hannah? He whispered. I didn't know what to say. My lips trembled. How do you know my name? He stepped out, one trembling hand reaching toward me. Because you look just like your mother. We stood there for what felt like forever, the wind rustling the trees around us. Then he invited me in. The cottage smelled like oil paint and cedar. It was warm, filled with books and canvases and photographs. He made us tea, though his hand shook so much I had to help him carry the cups. He told me everything. He and my mother were in love when they were young. Deep, reckless, overwhelming love, but he struggled with depression and addiction. He didn't want to bring a child into that chaos. He left, hoping it would spare us pain. He had no idea she would marry someone else so quickly. No idea she would erase him from my life. I asked him if he ever tried to come back. He nodded, eyes full of regret. I wrote letters, but when I called once, Daniel answered. He told me you weren't mine, that Teresa wanted nothing to do with me. I didn't know what to believe. My chest tightened. Daniel had lied to him, too. My so-called father had not only kept Michael from me, he'd told him I wasn't his. We talked for hours. He showed me old paintings he'd made of my mother, of me, imagined versions of the daughter he never got to know. I cried when I saw one that looked exactly like me as a child, standing in a sunflower field. I stayed the night on the couch. In the morning, I made us breakfast and we laughed for the first time. It was awkward and warm and filled with the kind of healing that only truth can bring. I stayed in the Catskill for a week. Every day, we walked, talked, painted. I learned about his life, his regrets, his recovery. He had been sober for 10 years. Alone, but alive. When I returned home, I didn't speak to Daniel. I didn't need to. The last thing I said to him that night at dinner would be the last words I ever spoke to him. But I did sit down with my mother. She cried before I even said a word. I'm sorry, Hannah, she whispered. I thought I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself. I replied. You took away my right to know him. I know. I told her I had met him. that he was kind, broken, but kind. I told her he loved her still, and that he had never stopped thinking about me. She wept. It took time, but we started to rebuild our relationship. Slowly, painfully. Some wounds stay with you, but the truth, at least, was out. A year later, I invited Michael to my wedding. I was marrying a man who had stood by me through all of it, the unraveling, the discovery, the healing. He walked me down the aisle, his hand trembling in mine. After the ceremony, he whispered, "Thank you for giving me the chance to be your father." I looked at him with tears in my eyes and said, "Thank you for never giving up." Now, I visit him often. His cottage has become a second home. He paints again with new joy. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see him, not just in my face, but in the spirit I carry. The resilience, the hunger for truth. They hid the truth from me for 25 years, but the attic gave it back. And with it, I found not just my real father. I found myself.